Good morning and welcome to the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for January 9th, 2020. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 through 9 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following items. Item 8, 19 PD 049, and Item 9, 19 UR 024. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on these items are final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 9 that staff would like to remove? Are there any items 1 through 9 that any Planning Commissioner would like to remove? And are there any items 1 through 9 that any audience member would like removed for separate consideration? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 9 in accordance with staff's recommendation. All right, Mike made the motion to approve items 1 through 9 in accordance with staff's recommendation, and Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10.
Can we take items 10 and 11 concurrently?
Please.
Item 10 is a rezoning request for medium density residential district to general commercial district for property located 1124 Kansas City Street. And item number 11 is 19 PD 048, a major amendment to the plan development to allow a theater and a church in the general commercial district. And this is for the same property. Located 1124 Kansas City Street, existing building and parking. The rezoning is specific to the south portion, and then the plan development is for the lot, includes the lot across the alley. You can see it's developed with a building which was previously used as a church, but also the last use in there was a YMCA child care center, and now the use going in there proposed is a shared use. It'll be a shared use facility with a 200-seat theater and potentially 200-seat church, and then a caretaker's unit on the second floor. The rezoning is to allow the theater. As you can see, the current zoning of that property is medium density residential district. Property, or the piece to the north, is already zoned general commercial district. We can see it's general commercial to the west and medium density to the east and the south, and then that pink is office commercial district. Future land use plan shows urban neighborhood and public, quasi-public. This area will be part of a routine comprehensive plan update. If the rezoning is approved, it'll go to mixed-use commercial, and we'll see that in the next routine comprehensive plan, future land use update. Here we have the major street plan showing St. Joe to the north is an arterial street. Site plan proposed. There's no expansion to the site proposed. There's parking on that lot to the north, and one change is the direction of the parking on this east side, where today you come in from the Kansas City Street into the alley and park into the property, that it's being changed so that the curbs are on the alley side, so they don't back into the right-of-way. So now we're getting to the exceptions. The first exception is to reduce the parking from 55 parking spaces to 32 parking spaces. Previously, with the Child Care Center and the plan development, a exception was granted to reduce the parking from 110 to 32 parking spaces. So this is a decrease in that exception request. And we do see that there is additional on-street parking along 12th Street and Kansas City Street. And Public Works staff has indicated that if there was redevelopment of the streets, that on-street parking would stay in place. So with that additional on-street parking, staff is recommending that the exception to reduce the parking from 55 to 32 be granted. And then the other exception was one which was previously approved for all of this parking to allow it to back into the alley right-of-way. With this design, we get rid of these ones backing into the right-of-way, and we just have these 9 which continue to back into the right-of-way. So we are recommending that the exception be acknowledged to allow those parking spaces to back into the right-of-way. Landscape plan shows existing elevations submitted by the applicant, existing signage, and then what they would be proposing. They did hold a public meeting for the neighbors in the area, and staff has not heard anything that from the neighbors regarding this application. Signs are posted on the property, looking along Kansas City Street to the west and to the east. The YMCA daycare is moved into that old Black Hills Power building. Looking to the south where there is a child care center. This is that parking on the east side of the building, and then the adjacent development. And then this is looking north to where the general commercial district is existing with a gym and other uses in that building. Looking to the south along that street, and then the other side of the building, and then that's where the parking currently used by the YMCA for their buses, but that would be the additional parking for the proposed use. This is a adaptive reuse and a shared use facility being proposed, and it's supported by the comprehensive plan. So staff is recommending approval of the rezoning request and the major amendment to the plan development. Are there any questions for staff?
Thanks, Fletcher. Mike Kwasny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The parking out on the street, how many spaces are there? Do you know what that number is by chance?
I believe it's 37.
Okay. Is there any option on that east side to make those straight parking instead of?
No, they wouldn't be able to have the aisle width.
Okay. It just seems to me like we're running into, if they're going to have seats for 200 people, that you might run into a parking problem in that area. So that would be my only concern. I think it's a good use, but that would be the concern I would have.
Thanks, Mike. I don't have lights up from anybody else, but I have a speaker request from Stephen Ferrugia. I hope I got your name right. If you'd like to come up to the microphone over here, introduce yourself and give your address just for our records.
My name is Stephen Ferrugia. I'm the owner of Seraphim Theatrical Entertainment, and the address is 7029 Freedom Court, Apartment B in Blackhawk.
Do you have any remarks you'd like to share on this, or are you just here if we have questions?
I'm just here if you have questions, or if there's any gray areas you want cleared up on the business aspect of it and what we do.
Gotcha. Kelly?
Thank you. So, just from my understanding, is it a multi-use facility? Are you doing a church separate from the theater? Is it a shared space? In other
Yeah,
words?
it would
Just
be a
curious.
shared space, yes.
Okay, completely separate from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric Heikus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So typical hours of operation for the theater, is that something that could be made available?
Yes, our theater hours are very, very consistent in the fact that our classes and things that we do with kids is usually and typically done on Saturdays between the hours of 11 and 1 p.m. Sometimes we do certain other things, but never stretch further into the evening on weekends. We never do anything theater-wise during the weekdays, during business hours, just simply because everybody's at work or in school. So our typical business hours usually tend to be from 5 p.m. to roughly about 9 p.m. in the evenings.
Mr. Chair, I would add one quick comment that considering those hours of operations, there is some adjoining and other adjacent parking that maybe is not as utilized, say across the street or in other areas that they could draw from as sort of a shared parking arrangement, an informal one at least, if you're operating during Saturdays, for example. So
Right.
I'm not making any commitments for anyone, just saying.
Right.
Yep. Thank you. That answers my question.
Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. The use itself requires 55 parking spaces, and that would accommodate the 200 participants either of the theater or the church that would take place on Sundays. With the 32 on-site parking and the 37 adjacent street parking, that equals 69. This is far less than the exception that was granted for the child care center, where it required 110. We're not aware of complaints on parking requirements with that use. So with the evening usage of this facility, the on-site parking that Public Works has confirmed that any street improvements would maintain that parking, we thought this was a great reuse of an existing facility and maintaining that vitality of activity in an area that, with these older buildings, if we don't get creative, they'll sit empty.
Thanks, Vicki. I had one question, Mr. Frugia. The Y buses are still in that lot. Are you intending to lease that to the Y, or is that a temporary
That is
deal?
not a plan at this time. We're kind of just doing that as a show of good faith towards the Y. They don't have anywhere to put them right now, and we don't need the space yet. So,
Gotcha.
yep.
Okay. Any other questions on this one for the applicant? Vince?
I don't have any specific questions. I can only say that knowing the area and the plan that Stephen has for this, it's a great reuse of that property because it coincides with what we're trying to do with our downtown. And this is just another way. And they have this Seraphim Theater Group. I've actually been and seen a couple of these shows. They do a great job, and they work with children in the community. So this is a great project.
Mike Kwasny?
And I fully agree with that, Vince. I have no problem. I think it's a great reuse. I think it's an awesome thing to put in that facility. I think we need to, as Vicki said, keep those buildings happy. And I think it's a great project. The only concern I had, like I said, was the parking, but I think, as was mentioned, there is additional parking that can be used during those evening hours, and I think I think it's going to be a great addition to our city. So,
Thank you.
Don't have any other lights up for question or comment. I'd look for a motion then. Motion to accept the staff stipulation. Okay. Vince made the motion to approve items 10 and 11 per staff stipulations to approve the rezone and the amendment to the plan development per the 5 stipulations. Is there a second? I heard it. Eric Heikus. Oh.
I'll second.
All right, Mike Kwasny seconding. Thank you for the caution. I don't either. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12.
If we could take 12 and 13 together, that'd be great.
Sure.
As you know, this is, you've seen this before, this is an application to amend our existing ordinance and adopt a resolution to adopt and implement our new tax increment financing policy. At the last meeting, you gave us an opportunity to make a couple changes based on some comments that were there. I believe the benefits analysis and the update identifies those specifically. Only red comments address those comments from the 11-21 meeting, as well as the comments in the policy. After reading it, I did see that I need to make 3 minor changes. Page 11 needs to reference that loan origination fees are an eligible cost based on the interest, so I need to fix that. Page 14 needs to include some reference to the financial corporations ensuring that we have no conflict of interest with any organized new agencies. And then page 23, I neglected to remove the underline. There were some errors in who was a part of the TIF review team, and when you redline a document, generally you track it so that those are, but I do not use tracking and I miss those underlines. So those are the 3 things that I need to make changes based on what I identified online. But other than that, I think we've come up to a great compromise. There's some things that we can do to improve the certification process. The language that is included in there for the interest rate, I believe addresses that, because the concern was that if the market is volatile between the time the district is created and the time it's done, what do you do about the lack of interest? Well, there's a provision in state law that allows up to 35%. We have that specifically in the plan to allow that for interest costs. So we've got that addressed, I believe. But with that, we do recommend approval.
Thanks, Patsy.
I would just like to encourage or solicit your support for this item, which you have seen come before us several times now. Just to emphasize that we have been working on this update or revision to the policy for over 2 years, earnestly, and prior to that, quite a bit. I feel that the time spent, the experience that we've had with meeting with the local developers and bankers, meeting with Sioux Falls and Aberdeen, and having many opportunities for public input, we feel that we have refined this proposal down to a good proposal for revising the policy. And I do ask that this has been continued a couple of times at the request of some of the public, or one person anyway. And I believe that his request this time has been to get together with others in the community and see what they can come up with. I think that's a fine idea. I don't know that we as staff need to spend a whole lot of extra time going back to point zero or rehashing things that we've already gone through very significantly. I do feel this proposal is ready to go. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but I think it's worth bringing forward. It is a whole lot more perfect, closer to perfect, than our existing policy. So I think if we acknowledge that improvement is good and we can go ahead and adopt that, with the thought that if we decide that there's something out of order, we can come back and amend that as well. So I believe this is time for us to move forward on adopting this revised policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Young. John.
One thing. Since as long as I've been on this commission and involved in government in this town, the Planning Commission has always had a representative on the TIF committee. Why don't we anymore?
Well, if you look at state law, it doesn't require a special committee for a tax increment district. That's something that our community did years ago when they were created back in when our policy was first adopted in the early 80s. I think this proposal here today prevents applicants from going to council and vetting their project in front of council before the public hearing requirement is met. That's my concern, that, you know, if somebody challenged our actions, we could lose because we're not meeting that public hearing requirement. So similar to any other application, it goes through the tax increment financing review team. We work with the applicants to come up with an excellent proposal before we submit it to Planning Commission through that public hearing process. There are always changes that can be made between Planning Commission and Council if necessary. So I think similar to any other application, that's the reason why we proposed this particular structure.
Yes, so emphasizing the point that this is the common procedure, not only for all other applications that we bring forward through our department, but also common procedure throughout the state, that it is not common to have a first public hearing before the second public hearing, if you will. In other words, having Planning Commission, City Council, other people involved in a review hearing prior to coming to Planning Commission. That is not common. And so we're trying to just bring it into line with how things are done normally.
I would just like to add one thing. In our existing policy, there are ineligible costs unless the council gives authorization to include that in the application. So that's the piece that really concerns me, is that the applicant stands before the council, tells them everything about what's going on in the project before they even submit the application. That's, in my opinion, where the public hearing issue is created. So that's what we're trying to address.
So this is not going to originate in the Planning Commission as it...
Oh, absolutely. The first public hearing is before Planning Commission. And it's noticed in the paper. The problem with the existing policy is when applicants request the council to include specific items within the application, that is not noticed. So the public isn't getting their opportunity before it's already been vetted at council. So that's really what we're trying to address with that particular part of the proposal.
Thank you.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like this process has almost come full circle, because years ago we did have staff review things and make sure that it was a working document that we could actually have some vote on. And I've looked at this several times, and I know that Patsy has worked really hard, put a lot of time and effort into this to make sure everybody's voices are heard, and that she takes into consideration all the things that we've discussed up here. So I think this is a good policy. There are some things that I'm not, crazy about, but it's one of those things that I think is better than what we have by far. And I think over time, if those things that don't work right, we have that opportunity to go back and fix it. And I think this is a plus. It's a way to move forward, and I support it. So just wanted to put that forward.
Thanks, Karen. Eric Heikus?
So I'm going to make the astute observation that there are no developers in the audience this morning with any remaining issues with the document. And that, my implication, or what I imply from that, is that it's reached a satisfactory point. Either that or they've just been fatigued to the level they're going to stop. So I had to make a little joke there. But no, I think that the last couple meetings, which I thought I took quite a distinct fascination in, that there was only one developer, one group that was bringing forth changes to the document, and I think that the rest of the development community was pretty okay with what was being produced. So I think we've vetted that now. So that's my observation, at least. I just thought I'd share that. So.
Mike Klosny?
I think it's great the way that it was handled, the open houses, the forums that you guys had. I think that if the public input If they didn't get their word in, I guess it's their own bad, but you guys handled it very well. I appreciate the fact that you looked at it real hard. I've seen it, I watched a lot of different things that were brought up and evaluated, and I think it's great the way that it was handled. With that, I would make a motion that we accept this, both 12 and 13.
Okay, Mike Kwasny made the motion to approve items 12 and 13, and Karen seconded that motion. Any comments on the motion? I just have some minor ones. First, thank you for all the work that you put into this. We sent this back a number of times. I don't regret those times that we continued it. I think it was part of the process to make sure we get the best, that we can. I agree with Ken, the best we can is never going to be perfect, but this is a good faith effort, and I think the city council will receive something that is worth looking at.
Thank you.
That said, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. What? No. No from John Hare. All right, motion carries. Staff items or discussion items today? All right, welcome to 2020. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Mike Gallagher made the motion to adjourn. Second. And Mike Kwasny seconded it. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye.